get into the junior yearling boar division, and I think for me, we get into heat number 1, and entry number 20 is going to win this class. And I think a boar that's extremely good into the angle to his shoulder and his front knee. I think you study him on the drive. I think he's extremely comfortable in the way that he hinges and utilizes his hip and his hind leg. I think a boar that's got some depth of body. He's big in terms of his forearm. I think he's a stout featured individual. If we could change our class winner, I'd just like to change him just in terms of his correlation to his hock. I don't know if he's got just a shot of swelling on his back right, but maybe a boar that wants to funnel at his hocks, wants to close up at the ground. I think you study him up front. I think you open him up just a shot in terms of his chest width, and I think we got one that runs away with it. And second is going to be entry number 19, and I think when the gentleman gets this boar out and gets him rocking and rolling, I think a boar that is extremely fluid off both ends of his skeleton. He really utilizes his hip and his hind leg. I love his levelness of back. You study him from blade to the front side of his hip, he's extremely level there. I think he's got some length, he's got some extension, he's got some balance. For me, the biggest concern on this boar is you study him up front, you study him going away from him. He wants to get too concaved in terms of his knee. He wants to close up the most in terms of his base width, but still, I think a really nice boar to go in second. And then we're going to round out the class with entry number 21, and I think a boar that you can just appreciate. Just a boar that packs a lot of punch from a muscle and roundness, a rib standpoint. I think he's opened up about his blades. He's big in terms of his back. He's really wide-backed kind of a boar. For me, the biggest question on this one is you study him up front. He's the longer-toed hog that is a little longer pasture, and he wants to get the narrowest in terms of his chest floor, wants to get the narrowest in terms of when you study him going away from you at the ground. I think a boar, we need to bring him up in terms of his pin set, maybe level him out of his hip just a shot to rival the two ahead of him. Really good class. My compliments to these exhibitors. We get into heat number 2 of the junior yearling boar division, and I think for me, it's entry number 24 is going to take this one and run with it. I think a boar that's he's really masculine. He's really rugged about his makeup. You know, he's just the real world kind of a boar. I think one that's got some muscle. You could tell the boar that maybe looks like he's got some age to him. But I'm going to tell you what, this boar is extremely opened up. He's stout in terms of his feature. I think a boar that just looks like he can just get out and cover sows all day long and still be extremely fluid and still have enough energy to do it at the end of the day. I think one, he's extremely level-backed. He's extremely level-hipped. Yeah, we could probably fix him right there at the crest of his neck. We could probably rock his shoulder back in his skeleton ever so slightly. But I want to tell you what, this thing is extremely sound. He's extremely flexible. I really, really like this boar to win this particular class. After that, we're going to go second place is going to be entry number 22. And I think a really, really nice boar in his own right. I think one that's extremely level in terms of his back, in terms of his hip. He's stout in terms of his structure. I think he's really good in terms of his pastern set. For me, where he goes second, you study him up front, he probably wants to bring his shoulder just a little too far forward in his skeleton. I like to bring his tail set up in him just ever so slightly. Maybe like to see him just kind of curl his tail, maybe be a little bit more comfortable. Maybe that will allow him to stride just a shot better out of his hip and his hind leg. Like to open him up in terms of his chest floor for him to get any higher. We're going to round out the class with entry number 23, and I think just a, good, solid, complete kind of a boar pick. I think this is probably the levelest hip boar of the class. I think one that he's extremely up-headed. He's really nice balanced. I love the center body of this boar, but for me, I think when you study him, he's probably just the smaller made, smaller packaged boar of the trio, maybe pushing a little bit more in terms of his throat latch and his jowl. He's really big forearmed. I think he just gives up too much in terms of his contemporaries for him to move up any higher. Really good class. Congratulations to these exhibitors. We get out here for champion junior yearling boar, and entry number 24 just is going to take it for me today. And I think one we talked about in class, really rugged, masculine-made boar, but he is extremely jet level in terms of his back. I love his openness of rib. Really big forearm, stout featured, big pawed kind of a boar that just gets out here and motors all day long. Really, really like that boar a great deal. For reserve is going to be entry number 22, and I think one that, when you compare him back to the champion boar, I think one that complements him in just terms of his length and just his levelness of back. We talked about him, maybe one that just closes up a shot when he goes away from you. Like to see him just a little bit more comfortable out here in the ring setting, but I think you look past that. I think he's got a lot of attributes that he brings to the table just in terms of, just being opened up, in terms of his forerib, having some depth of body, one that's got some lower stifle shape, like that one to go reserve. And for third overall is going to be entry number 20, and I think you study this one just in terms of length of spine and his comfortability. I like this one a really good deal to be third. I just think, you study him on the move and you study him, and when you get right in behind him, maybe one that just funnels just a shot. We talked about him in terms of his hock, and maybe one that wants to close up and just consequently, maybe just doesn't have the width that the other two have, but I think one that brings to the table just in terms of length and profile and look and balance. Just need to open him up when you get right in behind him. Really, really good drive. My congratulations to these exhibitors.